J. Warner Wallace is a cold case homicide detective who's been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Dateline, and Court TV. Now, we join him as he applies his investigative skills to making a case for Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I am J. Warner Wallace.
And I'm Jimmy Wallace.
And I just wanted to take a second to tell you what we're up to. We're actually starting a series in which we're going to just interact back and forth. My son and I, remember, Jimmy, we used to do these podcasts when we were a lot younger. You were maybe in high school or maybe a little bit older than high school. Maybe, yeah, I think you were in high school. And those podcasts are still online. As a matter of fact, I've been re-releasing some of them. And people have been writing to me and saying, hey, why don't you guys do those anymore? Well, a lot of it's been our schedule has been so opposite, but I'm just glad we get a chance to do this now. And I was thinking earlier when I looked at this image of both of us that it's kind of scary to me because it's almost like, the before and after picture where like this young, good-looking guy and then the old, tired man. I kind of feel.
I just exfoliate more.
Yeah, but yeah, you exfoliate more. Is that what you do?
Yeah,
okay, well,
that's all. That's the only difference.
Well, you can tell it's the holiday season, but based on our backgrounds, our Jimmy's background there, and this is my holiday goatee, which I just try not to even shave if I'm not traveling to speak anywhere. So this is what I look like in the off season. So I'm just glad that you're joining us for this conversation. We're going to take a look at kind of some of the not hot topics, but current events in this series for the entire season. This is season 8 of our NRBtv show, and you're also going to post these on YouTube. But so what we're going to do is take a look at some of the current events that are going on and just give you a kind of a quick response. And our hope here is that it models even for you the kinds of conversations you can have back and forth in your own family or with your friends as you look at some of the things that pop up in the news and in the news feed. So that's the goal. And by the way, some of these...
And that's what we do usually when we're together is talk about whatever all this stuff is going on and what's it mean and what's God think about it.
Yeah, and you remember we used to do this when you were a lot younger with and that we kind of taught each other. I was a brand new Christian when you were probably maybe 8 or 9 years old. And I remember we used to have conversations at the dinner table with our friends who were further along in their walk as Christians than we were. We had met them at church, like Dirk. But maybe he wasn't somebody who was like taking an evidential approach to Christianity. So we were all journeying through the journey together. And I remember you would sit and listen, and David too would sit and listen because you guys were old enough to sit at the table. And it kind of shaped how you thought about Christianity.
Yeah, I thought that was normal. All Christians must just have these really deep conversations about all kinds of things, important things of theology as well as all the non-essentials and how does it apply to our life. And I just thought that was normal. Maybe it is normal, I don't know, but definitely in our family it was normal to have heated discussions, debates, and no holds barred fights sometimes about what does Scripture mean, what does it mean for us, that kind of stuff.
Well, wait a minute. Did it feel like it was a fight sometimes? I guess because we were passionate. Is that?
A friendly fight. Like a sparring match. It's training. We're all trying to be the best Christians we can be, the best thinkers, understand the topics as well as we can. So no, in a friendly way.
Yeah, and we were discovering a lot of this stuff for the first time too. I mean, not so much that we already kind of examined whether Christianity was true, but there still are some deeper theological conundrums that you're going to have to explore as you kind of disciple, right? And that's how those affect the world around us. That's what we're going to try to do and have those kinds of conversations this season, season 8 of our NRBtv show. And so let's get started right away. We've got an article I want to read to you because 2 articles popped up last week, and we emailed each other about these at the same time. And it was keyed on a concept that most of us talk about, which is the concept of evil. So I want to read an article, and I'll just throw it up here on the screen. This is an article from the UK on Wales Online. There's a bunch of these. Evil stepmother found guilty of murdering 6-year-old Arthur Labino Hughes. Now look, I recognize that some of this is hard to listen to. So if you're, for me as a homicide detective, this is like, oh, no big deal. But I'll be honest, if this is going to be disturbing, but it is important to kind of at least touch on it, because it's interesting that every single article that we found on this, yeah, pretty much every single article, the descriptor evil is in the title. That whoever's writing this, there's like a universal view that whatever this woman did and this man did to their 6-year-old child, it was evil. So I'll just give you a little bit of this so you can see. An evil stepmother and father have been convicted of cruelly abusing and killing his 6-year-old son. So it's the stepmother and the biological father. Emma Teston, 32, was unanimously convicted of murdering Arthur Labino Hughes at Coventry Crown Court on Thursday. Her partner and Arthur's father, 29-year-old Thomas Hughes, was found guilty of manslaughter after his son suffered an unsurvivable brain injury on June 16, 2020. In court, the pair have been described by prosecutors as utterly ruthless, unthinking, and pitiless. Speaking after the verdicts, Arthur's maternal grandmother, Madeline Halcrow, called the couple wicked, quote-unquote, and evil, quote-unquote. Now, that might be, but stop right there for a second, Jimmy. As I think about it, it might just be that the reporters are repeating back the description that's been offered by the grandmother here, right? But it is interesting that this is the claim. You know, I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, it could be that, but I think that because we see this in every article, and we're not really seeing the writer push back on this idea. I think that it's pretty clear that the writers of these articles really think seem to think that this is an evil act, but also have this belief that their readers are going to accept that this is evil. That there's no discussion about is this evil or not. They're just describing something evil that occurred that they think everybody would agree about.
Yeah, you're right. And it says here that she described it as evil and described their behavior, which included Tustin poisoning the youngster by force-feeding him salt-laced meals, as unfathomable. I'll just go a little bit further, so bear with me. I think they are cold, calculating, systematic torturers of a defenseless little boy. They're wicked, evil. There's no word for them, especially your own child, she said. Okay, so that's, you get the idea. This couple has been systematically abusing and torturing and then ultimately killed a 6-year-old. Okay. Now, I think most of us, would you agree, would find that as evil. But it seems to me, and you tell me if you agree on this, that for us to call, I mean, why are we calling this evil? Like, how are we grounding this? What makes, this sounds like a stupid question, but what makes the abuse of a 6-year-old evil?
I think the reason we kind of we think, oh, is this a stupid question to ask? Is this evil? Is because I think that typically we take for granted the idea that there are good things and there are bad things, that there's good and evil in the world. I don't know if I've ever met anyone who would believe that there's no evil in the world. At best, we might disagree sometimes about what is evil or maybe what is good. But I think everyone I've personally met would agree that there is evil things, and it's something that we almost take for granted because it's so obvious. And then I think an example like this is not just that there's a claim that something is evil, but this is an example that I think we'd have a really hard time finding anyone who would disagree with the assessment that torturing a child for essentially no reason, because I think in the article, I don't remember if there's a reason given, but for essentially no good reason, is evil. I don't think we'd have a hard time finding anyone who would disagree with that.
And even,
or I think we'd have a hard time finding someone who would disagree with that.
No doubt. And so here's my question, though. Clearly to these two people, they were involved in the systematic abuse of a child. And for all those weeks and months or however long they were doing it, those two people did not see this as evil. In other words, how do we define evil to begin with? Is it just a matter of personal opinion? You don't like what happened to this boy? Because they didn't seem to care what happened to this boy. They did not see it as evil. They were consistently involved in this behavior, and they didn't see it as evil. So it cannot be a matter of like personal opinion, right? Because we would say, no. Are we going to say then that we could never prosecute people who hold a view that affirms their bad behavior? No, we would say you need to prosecute people who break a law. So then the question becomes, okay, so is it only evil because a group the culture they happen to be in thinks it's evil? Is that why it's evil? Or is there a third option? And that's where I think you and I would say the third option is better. Agreed?
Yeah, I think that the question is, when we're saying something is evil, are we just saying that we don't like it, or that our culture doesn't like it, or are we saying something? I would say that most people, when they see a story like this and they say it's evil, they really mean that it is truly, in reality, evil. It wouldn't matter who these people, who the parents were, at what time they lived, and what country they were living, that this is actually evil in a way that transcends their opinion, their culture, the natural laws. But if that's the case, then I think the question is, why would we believe that how can we explain where this idea of evil comes from? On what are we measuring? I think we all have had an experience. I think I don't remember if it's this article you're reading or in one of the other ones, the mother of the child eventually does express some type of remorse, or she says that she's embarrassed or something like that by her past behavior. Now, I think we've all had times when we've done something where we later realized, we may have in the moment believed that what we were doing was totally acceptable, but in the end we realized, wow, that was wrong, the way I was acting, the way I treated someone. But the question is then, if we can change from, if we can realize and have remorse about a past action, then I guess it's not really up to our own opinion about whether it was good or bad, because when we were doing the evil thing, we thought it was okay, and later we thought it was wrong, and this kind of creates like this ambiguous idea of right or wrong. Really what we're doing is comparing ourselves, our own past action, against some standard that's outside of ourselves. But I think the big question is, what is that standard? How do we explain where that comes from? Not only there's I think two big questions: is there really good and evil, and then the second thing is, how do we know what those things are? How do we know what is really good and what is really evil?
Yeah, good point. And I think sometimes too, when people express remorse, you see this all the time. I'm really embarrassed, in essence, that I got caught. I'm really embarrassed that the world now knows about this thing that I had no misgivings about doing for years. But I'm really embarrassed now that that's been exposed. I think that's part of where I see also, are we really truly repentant, or are we just kind of, we would continue to do this if we hadn't gotten caught? So anyway, that being said, I'll take a quick break. When we come back, I want to add a twist to this, because another story came out the exact same week, same day that this story came out, which I think really twists and causes us to think deeply about the nature of evil and how we ground it.
These are 7 reasons why I think God would allow any act of evil and still be a holy, all-powerful, loving God. If you've suffered evil, hang with me for a second, and let's think clearly about why God might have allowed it. The first thing that I think changes everything is an accurate view of eternity. I will tell you, as an atheist, I saw life as a line segment. You have a point called birth, a point called death, and you have 90 years in between. I hope to get 90, right? My mom's side of the family lives into their mid-90s. So I was hoping for 90 pain-free, enjoyable years. And if I don't get 90 pain-free years, I'm going to call that evil. So for example, if I came down with cancer, say at 40, and suffered 10 years trying to fight it and then died at 50, I'm going to be upset. And I'm going to call that evil. And many of you have suffered that kind of loss in your family. Because we expect something and we're not getting it. This is evil because we had this expectation and now we've lost it. It turns out that everything that we determine is evil, we do so on the basis of our idea of what our life ought to have been. How many of you in this room, when you were an infant, had to have an operation that was really brutal and you almost died, but you needed that operation to fix a valve in your heart or something, and that's why you survived to this day? Raise your hand if you're someone like that. There's always a few, right? And I'll bet you, if I was to stop your life at that point when you had this operation, you would say, oh man, life stinks. If I stopped you, if I could find a way to have you be able to voice how you were feeling the day of the operation or the day after the operation, it was brutal. But by the time you're like 3 or 5 years old, you've already forgotten about it. Why? Because this evil, again, is measured in the context of your life. And by the time you're out here or here or here, it's no big deal anymore. You suffered it for a moment compared to your 90 years. Right? Now the question is, what if I'm wrong about my idea of what life is? What if life's not a line segment, but is instead a ray that starts here at birth, extends through the thing we call death, and then goes off infinitely in that direction? Life is not a line segment. Life is a ray, according to Christianity. If life is a ray, then anything that happens in this point we call life, which is actually just your temporal life, compared to eternity, think about your 90 years compared to forever. 100 years into forever, your 90 years is only half your life. 200 years, and you see what I'm saying? The longer this extends in that direction, the shorter by comparison is your mortal life, until finally your mortal life is like a blink compared to your real life. So you could have the worst 90 years consecutive you could ever think of having. But guess what? In the context of our worldview, where we believe in eternal life, that's a millisecond. Because that evil has to be measured in the context of what we call life. That's what we do with evil. We measure it in the context of what we call life. So my problem with evil was simply that I had the wrong view of life. Evil should be a problem for atheists, but it shouldn't be a problem for you guys. Because we ought to live like this is true. When we start belly aching about evil, it's because we're living like the line segment is true.
Need a speaker for your next conference, retreat, training seminar, or church service? Jim travels around the country making the case for the existence of God, the deity of Jesus, and the reliability of the Bible. He'd love to partner with you to create a powerful, transformational training experience. Just visit the Cold-Case Christianity website and click the Book Me tab. You'll find everything you need to know, including a list of Jim's speaking topics, promotional materials, Jim's speaking calendar, and a link to connect with our team so we can book your event.
Okay, I know there's another article that came out and posted the same day as that article on the evil set of parents that had tortured their 6-year-old. So why don't you go ahead and read this? This is about a set of Google employees, right?
Yeah, so this is a story coming out of Google. It says that a group of former Google employees sued the company, alleging that the company breached employment contracts by not honoring its famous motto. Google has this motto that they say they live by: "Don't be evil." In the lawsuit, it's filed in California, the employees are alleging that Google violated this "Don't be evil" pledge. And the way in which they're saying they did this is that their software engineers who are bringing this lawsuit, they said that they've raised concern at town halls and some other forums inside Google that the company was selling technology, cloud technology, to the U.S. government, to some immigration authorities, and that these workers for Google, these employees, considered the working with the government to be evil, and that they believe that because that Google was doing something that they considered to be evil, that Google therefore breached this motto, "Don't be evil." And that Google's policies, they're saying the policies call for them to act honorably and treat each other with respect, and that Google did not do this. And they're seeking basically some type of damages, but also to try to get Google to adhere to its own motto, which is "Don't be evil." I think this really shows us the importance of defining our terms, or why. I think sometimes there's that question: why even ask what is evil, or isn't it obvious? But I think if you don't define the term evil, then you get into this position where Google wants to hold to, let's assume everybody here is acting under totally good intent. Okay, we'll just assume that. Google has this motto, "Don't be evil," that they supposedly want to follow. And it may be that Google believes that they did not violate it by working with the government. They think that that wasn't an evil act, but some of their employees do. And so now Google's saying, we didn't violate the motto, everything we did was fine. And the employees, on the other hand, are saying, you absolutely did. What you did was evil, was terrible. And so now we're at this crossroads. The big question now is what they did evil? And if that's going to be the question,
And how do
need to be able to
how do we
define it.
ground evil to begin with? Yeah, how do we ground it to begin with? That's the other question, right? Like we're calling it evil, but who gets to call it evil?
Yes, according to Google's own opinion, what they did was not evil. But according to the opinion of these employees, it was evil. Now, they both can't be right. Maybe it was evil, maybe it was not evil, but they both can't be right. One of these people may be in the right in saying that Google is the employees might be right in saying Google is evil. They might be wrong, but we need to look at something outside the employees and outside Google, some other transcendent moral law. We need to look to that so we can compare the opinions of the people involved to the ultimate authority. And that's the question: is what is that ultimate authority that could determine what is good and evil? And as Christians, we point to God for that, because we don't really see a better explanation other than a transcendent person that could determine for us what is good and evil.
Yeah, one of the problems with all this whole thing is that they didn't say, "Hey, don't be late for a meeting." But then that's something they can hold within the organization. Don't put the trash in that receptacle after lunch. Now that's an internal policy, but they pointed to something that we all have a sense that evil is a concept that transcends that company. And we pointed, it's so interesting to me when they actually first started with that motto, don't be evil, because then the question becomes, well, who gets to define what evil is? Clearly, these employees not only even know the exact details of what they're complaining, but it doesn't really matter. Because whatever they're complaining about, they're saying, that was evil. You guys broke your own rule. And then, of course, the company is going, well, no, and according to us, this is not evil. And there is the dilemma. If we're saying that just the largest governing body gets to decide what is evil, well, then we're down to just might makes right. And in this case, I'm the boss. I have the power. You aren't the boss. Therefore, I get to decide what is evil. Now, clearly, the employees along the way are going to start to disagree with some of these actions. They already have. So the question then becomes, well, who do I point then to? Like, if we're going to go to court about this, what are we going to say? We're going to say, hey, these guys violated their motto because they did something evil. According to who? Like, you're going to have to get into court then and say there's an objective standard of evil that transcends the company, right? And that's the problem. Or you could just say, well, they broke a federal law. But then the question becomes, well, if I'm in a country that has a different federal law, does that make it okay to do it there? This is the problem, is that evil, the definitions of evil, require a standard of righteousness by which we compare an action and determine that it's not meeting that standard. It's as C.S. Lewis says, you don't know what a crooked line is unless you know what a straight line is. And the straight line has to transcend you. Everyone's got a bit, all of us, because we're fallen humans, are only capable of drawing crooked lines. We want a transcendent straight line to compare to, and we're never going to get that from us. But I wanted, before we kind of wrap this up, this idea that these articles are coming out. And by the way, this happens all the time online. Start looking for it. It's not that the word evil is going to be used. It's just concepts of right or wrong, of what is moral or immoral. These pop up online all the time. And then the question becomes, well, according to who? And again, every time someone makes a claim of morality, whether it's evil or righteousness, they are assuming a Christian or a theistic worldview. But I want to just throw this out to you, Jimmy, because this gets asked all the time. It's this Euthyphro dilemma, this idea that, well, okay, so you're saying then that, so if God changed the rules, would this no longer be evil? If your Christian God, affirmed the torturing of 6-year-olds, would that now make it a moral act? Or is this always an immoral act, and it was an immoral act even if your God doesn't say it's immoral? Well, in that case, you have two options. One, morals are the willy-nilly decision of your stupid God. Or two, the morals actually preceded your God, and your God is unnecessary because those morals are the foundation. Your God's just repeating a foundation he's not required for. So what would you say to people who say either offer one of those two objections?
Yeah, wow, those are big objections. We could do several segments just on these topics. So I don't know if we have time to go in deep. I think the two biggest things that we would say is that it is not, the Bible does not teach that God he felt today like torture was wrong, so torture is wrong today, and tomorrow he might feel differently. Instead, the way that typically we will break this down is to say that the moral laws are a reflection of God's character, the way that he is. God has a personality like you and I do. He has a certain character, and his character is perfect, and that these moral laws are simply a reflection of his character. So when we say that God is good, it's just that the things that are good are the way that God is, and so that there's not an ability of God to suddenly change his mind tomorrow and now torture is good, because his character constrains him as a perfect being to being perfect. He would need somebody else. Even if, though, I think the second part of your objection, even if we could say that a particular God was evil, let's just say that for the sake of argument, we really think that this God is evil, then yeah, it's because we're comparing that God to a standard of morality that transcends even that God. And our question is going to be then, where does that moral law come from? I think all you're doing is postulating probably like the ancient Greeks, where you have a series of gods, and some of them are kind of evil and some of them are kind of good, but ultimately you're going to get to the God above all, quote unquote, gods in this case. Where the things that are going to be required to get us a moral law is a person whose character can provide us the guidance to let us know what is right or what is wrong. Mm-hmm. So eventually, I don't think that actually solves the problem of God. Morality can't come from God because God is evil. Even if you could somehow argue that a given God is evil, all you would, I think, really be doing is kind of kicking back the argument one more step. Yeah. Okay, so there's a God above that God who can judge this minor God for being evil. From a practical standpoint, if we're going to say that good and evil exist, then we need to know how could those things exist, and also how can we know them? Because like this case with Google, if you don't know what evil is, if it's not defined, then practically speaking, it's not very useful as a concept. So we need to know, how can we describe that good and evil exists, and how do we know it? And I think God is the answer for us for that.
Yeah, you make a good point, and we're almost out of time, but I wanted to say one last thing too. You know that in the end, all moral obligations are between persons. I'm not morally obligated to this. Yes, people have seen me drinking Monster energy drinks, but I'm not going to get into that today. But I'm not obligated to that.
I'm doing Rip It.
I'm not obligated. Okay, you're doing Rip It. Okay, we're bad. We're fallen humans who drink energy drinks, but I'm not obligated to this cup. I'm only obligated to persons. And so the moral obligations indicate the existence of a moral person to whom we are obligated. So in the end, I do think that a personal God is still the best way to ground. And you're right, it's about a reflection of his nature. Absolutely. Now, I hate to say it, but we are out of time.
Well, thanks for everybody for joining us on the Cold-Case Christianity Broadcast. We'll see you next week.
To hear more from J. Warner Wallace, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For more information on this week's topic, visit youtube.com/coldcasechristianity with J. Warner Wallace. Thank you for joining us on this Cold Case Christianity broadcast.